everybody, welcome to another lesson of Japanese. Today we are going to be covering a broad topic, no pun intended here. We're going to be covering the differences between female and male speech in Japanese. So this is probably one of the most common questions that we get. You know, how do I avoid sounding too much like a girl, or how do I avoid sounding too much like a boy? And to be fairly honest, most of the time this question comes from people who are still pretty new to the language. Maybe the reason they're asking is because they're learning mostly through talking to somebody, a native Japanese or something, and they don't want to come off as too girly or too boily, or too manly. And they're using this more as a form of practice than something like textbook learning. So before we actually go into it, I just want to start off by saying pretty much the best response to this, or the best general response to this, is to not worry about it at all. The number one reason being because, you know, if you're talking to a native Japanese speaker and you do come off as too girly or manly, they'll definitely understand if they know that you're learning the language. Secondly, if you are basically a kind of beginner to the Japanese language and you're asking this question, to be honest, we are going to explain it in this video lesson, but even if you were to get the full explanation, there are probably points in that explanation that you wouldn't understand, just because they involve pretty intermediate topics and not just things that you would come across right off the bat of learning the language. So the best general response to this, I think, is just don't worry about it. It'll come to you naturally as you keep learning the language, and you don't have to worry about coming off as anything because yeah. That being said, of course, if you still want to know, you can just, continue watching this video or reading this lesson. Okay, so in many languages across the world, there is a clear distinction between basically masculinity and femininity. For example, of course, in the Spanish language, all noun words are assigned a grammatical gender, even if they're words that represent basically inanimate objects that have no physical gender. The Japanese language employs a difference between female and male speech in a much lighter sense, in that basically male speakers and female speakers will, speak in a slightly different way in certain points of their dialogue/sentences, but even if they didn't, if a male speaker did the kind of female approach and a female speaker did the kind of male approach, their sentences would still be 100% grammatically correct. It just comes off as kind of non-male or non-female, but the sentences will still be perfectly fine. So in this sense, gender-based Japanese speech is really kind of stylistic. And more importantly, it doesn't really exist at all in polite speech. It only appears in kind of casual speech. So new learners to the Japanese language, kind of beginners, if they're using textbooks, if they're learning by a kind of textbook method, they're likely to not come across the differences between female and male speech in their learning, unless they actually kind of proactively looked it out, because textbooks will usually use polite speech, formal speech, and they won't really get into that. So basically, the differences between female and male speech won't become prominently observable until you go into casual conversation, and basically, in that casual conversation, the people talking are kind of comfortable enough to start using those kind of stylistic things to their speech to kind of express that they're kind of more girly or more manly. And so yeah, basically keep in mind that from whatever we're going to say henceforth is basically in the realm of casual conversation. There are some other kind of disclaimers, I guess you would call it, to establish right now. We are basically going to be talking in kind of the realm of standard Japanese. If you were to put dialects into the fray, things would get really confusing. We have some kind of general guidelines that we're going to establish that would just completely be nullified if you were to be addressing Kansai region Japanese or some other dialect. And kind of the last but most important disclaimer we have here is that male speech and female speech differing is kind of a myth, in a sense, in the Japanese language. There's a long history to it, in that kind of what we call feminine speech derives from how female Japanese speakers spoke a long time ago, but there's not really any rules that say you have to speak that way. Additionally, today more than ever, female speakers are talking like male speakers, so the line is getting really blurred. You have media, entertainers are frequently blurring the line as well. They're using a fusion of male and female speech. And even in kind of fiction, Japanese anime and drama, they're kind of over-exaggerate the difference between male and female speech. So some of the things that we'll be talking about are you'll see them a lot in anime and drama, but when you go into real life and you hear a female speak, she doesn't speak that way at all. She just speaks really normally like a guy would, basically. From what I've heard and read even, there's kind of a collective consciousness between native Japanese speakers where they're kind of puzzled or surprised by how movies or TV shows will always make females so exaggerated in the way that they speak feminine when that doesn't really happen at all in real life. So yeah, the big important thing to note here is that it is ever changing. The distinction between male and female speech, it's changing even today. The subculture of language is always changing. So none of the things basically that I say are going to be strict 100%. You have to follow this, but it is important to kind of know the history and the kind of how things are now. Even if they are going to change, you do kind of want to get a feel of that. So this is why the lesson is necessary. Okay, so now we're going to split our explanation into basically kind of 3 categories. The 3 most prominent things that will differ between female and male speech. The first one, we're going to kind of go in an order of most likeliest to distinguish between. The first one is going to be basically pronouns, first person pronouns and second person pronouns, what word you use to call yourself and what word you use to call others. The second category is basically going to be sentence ending particles or sentence ending things in general, the kind of things that you will put at the end of your sentence to flourish it. It'll make you sound more feminine or more masculine. And the third and last category will basically be select phrases or words, because if you're a female, you're kind of more likely to use certain words or certain versions of the same word, and if you're male, you're kind of more likely to use some other version of that word or phrase. Okay, so we're about to jump into the first category, but one more thing to note here, it's kind of this general guideline that we'll be following throughout this video, is that we call it kind of female versus male speech in Japanese, but it is kind of synonymous with kind of soft/polite versus rough / emphatic speech. If you were to interpret it this way, it would possibly be a mnemonic device to help you remember, because generally in the Japanese language, as kind of strange as it might seem or wrong as it might seem, feminine speech is associated with kind of just being softer in your language, being more kind of reserved or polite, and then the male speech will be basically rougher, emphatic. Yeah, you're kind of not afraid to say what you want to say. Okay, so let's move into the first category, the pronoun. So this is probably something that you should know already. Pretty much all new learners of Japanese will come across this concept from the beginning. You use a different pronoun to refer to yourself, first person pronoun, and to refer to others, second person pronoun, depending on, kind of who you are. In this case, we're talking about female versus male, but it also applies to like your relationship to the person you're talking to. If it's your boss, you're the worker, or if you're the boss, or if you're the head of the household, or if you're the son, it all differs. We are just talking about females and males, so our explanation, this is going to be really short. Female speakers are just more likely to use the first person pronoun watashi to refer to I / themselves, or the kind of deformed version of it, the kind of more cutesy feminine version, atashi, without the W. Meanwhile, male speakers, boys, will more likely use the pronoun boku, which means, of course, I as well. It's a first person pronoun. In some other cases where they're kind of even more inclined to be kind of more masculine, they can use ore, which is more manlier, of course. This is more likely if they're just talking amongst their other male friends, kind of engaging in what we call like dude talk or something. In English, how we go, hey man, hey dude, stuff like that. But again, I'm going to keep throwing out these disclaimers just to enforce the idea that nothing is absolute. In the modern day of the Japanese language, some female speakers will be using boku and ore just to kind of try to they don't care about sounding feminine. They kind of want to even the line, hey, we're just turning this into gender neutral speech. So we can talk more about these pronouns because we also should address kind of like relationships. If the woman is talking to their husband or something, what pronoun are they more likely to use? We're not going to go into it because one of our very first videos on this channel, the second one and the third one, I believe, that covered first person pronouns and second person pronouns, covered a decent amount of content that kind of blends into this category. So I'm going to recommend that if you want to know more about that, what kind of pronouns you would use in regard to like your relationship to the person you're talking to, check out those videos. They were posted a long time ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, but yeah, still helpful information there. So check that out. I'll put the link in the description or the comment, or both. So yeah, so that was the first category, first person pronouns, the one that is like probably the most likely to happen, the one you're going to be able to rely on most to distinguish what gender the speaker is. If they say boku, then you're gonna go, oh, that's a dude or something like that. We're gonna move into our next category, which is, okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed your time doing so. If you'd like to express that, you can like the video, leave a comment below, or subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support more of these video lessons, please do consider checking out our Patreon page. Also included on the screen right now are, of course, a bunch of links on where to find and follow us elsewhere online. Lastly, check out our Discord server. We've got a community of hundreds of so if you're looking for somebody to voice chat with just to practice speaking Japanese, or if you just want to talk about anime or music or manga. And with that, see you next time.